Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang bahagia Profesor Datuk TS Dr. Shahrin bin Sahib, Vice Chancellor Universiti Teknologi Mara, Profesor Tipawan Nur Suwanarat, President of National Institute of Development Administration Thailand, Profesor Dr. Nur Hafizah Muhammad Harith, Dean of the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies, Universiti Teknologi Mara, honorable guests, distinguished scholars, practitioners, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam Malaysia Madani. Good day, Kap Kun Kap. Allow me to begin by expressing my profound gratitude for the invitation to deliver this keynote address. It is both an honor and a privilege to be with you today at a gathering that brings together some of the brightest minds from across the globe to discuss the future of governance and its relation to the social sciences. I must extend my heartfelt congratulations to the organizing committee for the efforts in convening this international conference in collaboration with distinguished international partners. Your success in creating this platform of dialogue reflects not only academic excellence but also a commitment to advancing the role of governance and social sciences in shaping a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world. Malaysia has long been a nation that places diplomacy and multilateralism at the heart of its foreign policy. Our foreign policy is one that emphasizes peaceful coexistence, respect for sovereignty, adherence to international law, and the pursuit of mutual prosperity. From the early years of independence, Malaysia has advocated for non-alignment, multilateral cooperation, and the strengthening of international institutions. We have sought to build bridges across regions, cultures, and ideologies, firmly believing that small and middle powers can play pivotal roles in shaping global governance. Today, these principles remain deeply embedded in our policy framework as Malaysia continues to champion peace building, South-South cooperation, and sustainable development through platforms such as ASEAN, the United Nations, and other global fora. In this spirit, I find it especially fitting that we are gathered here today under the theme Harmonizing Governance and Social Sciences for a Cohesive Society. For indeed, foreign policy, governance, and diplomacy cannot be understood in isolation. They are deeply intertwined with the currents of history, culture, economics, and the collective behavior of societies. The social sciences give us the tools to comprehend these complex dynamics, offering pathways to more humane and effective governance. Ladies and gentlemen, the essence of governance lies not merely in the act of governing but in the art of balancing competing interests, mediating diverse identities, and ensuring that the voice of every citizen is heard. Governance at its core is a social construct that is born from the values, traditions, and aspirations of the societies it seeks to serve. Here lies the natural intersection with the social sciences. Disciplines such as political science, sociology, anthropology, economics, and international relations provide the analytical frameworks to study human behavior, institutional dynamics, and cultural context. When harmonized with governance, these disciplines enable policymakers to craft policies that are not only efficient but also empathetic, inclusive, and sustainable. Consider, for example, the question of global migration. The governance of migration is not solely a matter of border management or legal frameworks. It is deeply tied to sociology, the integration of communities, the preservation of identity, and the management of diversity. Similarly, environmental governance cannot be confined to regulations alone. It requires an understanding of cultural attitudes toward nature, economic systems of production and consumption, and the behavioral incentives that drive human choices. By harmonizing governance with social sciences, we empower decision makers to move beyond transactional policies toward transformative ones, policies that do not merely react to crises but anticipate them, policies that do not simply dictate but engage, and policies that do not divide but unite. Ladies and gentlemen, let us situate this within the broader landscape of international relations. We gather at a time of profound global interconnection where the fortunes of nations are inextricably linked through the intricate webs of trade, diplomacy, and shared challenges. Today, I want to draw our attention to the internal character of a nation defined by the quality of its governance. It is this foundation that ultimately determines a country's credibility, its influence, and its ability to thrive within the community of nations. Poor governance, specifically specifically systemic corruption, does not merely tarnish a nation's image, it actively dismantles its strategic power and cripples its economic potential. To understand this interplay, we must first situate it within our current reality, a landscape defined by three seismic shifts. First, we operate in a multipolar world order. The rise of emerging economies alongside established powers has created a complex geopolitical environment. This new order demands governance models that are inclusive, adaptive, and responsive to diverse global voices. In this context, diplomacy is elevated from mere negotiation between states to a dialogue across civilizations, cultures, and knowledge systems. Second, we are bound by inescapable global interdependence. The pandemic was a stark reminder that a health crisis in one nation can trigger economic shock waves across the globe. Climate change, cyber threats, and financial instability recognize no borders. This interconnectedness means that governance can no longer be insular. It must adopt a multilateral lens, drawing upon the insights of the social sciences to foster the trust, solidarity, and cooperation that are the very oxygen of international relations. And third, we are navigating a deep and pervasive crisis of trust. Globally, confidence in public institutions is eroding. The most recent Edelman Trust Barometer reveals that only 40% of people believe their governments will do what is right. This erosion is not a passive statistic. It actively undermines democratic governance and creates fertile ground for populism and disinformation. Rebuilding this trust is our paramount task, and it requires policymakers to harness the tools of the social sciences, authentic engagement, strategic communication, and evidence based policy to reconnect with citizens and restore legitimacy. As Kofi Annan once noted, good governance is perhaps the single most important factor in eradicating poverty and promoting development. His words ring truer than ever, but we must now expand their scope. Good governance is essential not only within states, but also between them. It is the foundation of effective diplomacy. Let us consider the evidence. Data from World Bank's worldwide governance indicators show a staggering correlation. Countries with high scores in the rule of law and government effectiveness enjoy, on average, three times higher per capita income than those with weak governance. The OECD confirms that trust in public institutions is directly correlated with social cohesion and economic resilience. Societies that trust their governments are more adaptable, more compliant with collective measures, and more forward looking. In addition, studies from prominent institutions like the Brookings Institution reveal that nations with transparent governance are seen as more credible actors on the world stage. Their diplomatic commitments are trusted, thereby strengthening their bargaining power in international negotiations. This brings us to the hard consequences for any nation when this foundational trust crumbles. We can look at nations blessed with immense potential, yet their progress is held in check by a deficit of governance. In such context, a perception of systemic corruption becomes a severe brake on advancement. This is a challenge in various parts of the world, including in several African countries. It creates an environment where international capital is hesitant to invest and where trade relationships, especially with partners who prioritize transparency, become fraught with complexity. In some Southeast Asian countries, corruption creates bureaucratic friction, inflates costs, and fosters an environment of legal uncertainty that deters long-term investment and stains their global credibility. In extreme cases, governance failures have led to international sanctions, the withdrawal of foreign businesses, and a devastating loss of diplomatic standing. But the impact of poor governance extends far beyond economics. It is a primary enabler of transnational insecurity. Weak governance creates ungoverned spaces and corruptible institutions that transnational criminal networks eagerly exploit, as seen in some countries in South America. It directly compromises border security. When border officials are underpaid and oversight is weak, bribery becomes a gateway for human trafficking, smuggling, and the flow of illicit weapons. This does not just threaten one nation, it exports instability to its neighbors and partners. Perhaps most critically, poor governance undermines a nation's position in territorial disputes. A country that cannot document its own policies, enforce its own laws, or present a consistent, transparent administrative record lacks the foundational evidence to assert its claims credibly in international courts and diplomatic fora. It cannot project the stability and reliability required to be a trustworthy steward of contested territories. Conversely, a nation known for its strong rule of law and transparent institutions carries immense credibility into any negotiation, its claims backed by the weight of its governance. These are not isolated incidents, they are proof of a universal principle. A reputation for integrity is a nation's most valuable currency, and the rule of law is the foundation upon which lasting, profitable, and secure international partnerships are built. Ladies and gentlemen, so we arrive at the crucial question: how then do governance and diplomacy intersect? How does the internal character of a nation manifest on the global stage? The answer is that they are not separate realms. They are deeply fused, each giving life and force to the other. It begins with the bedrock of all influence, legitimacy and credibility. Consider this: a diplomat's briefcase is filled with more than just position papers. It carries the weight of the nation's character. A government that enjoys the genuine trust of its people, that governs with transparency and accountability, arrives at any negotiating table with an immeasurable asset: credibility. His word is its bond because its actions at home prove it so. Conversely, a state plagued by corruption or internal instability often finds its diplomatic voice weakened, its promises met with skepticism, its power to persuade is eroded from within. This foundation of credibility allows for policy consistency and a steady hand that guides international engagement. Effective governance creates structures that ensure continuity and strategic coherence in foreign policy. It allows our diplomats to negotiate not from a place of fleeting political whim, but from a position of clarity and long-term vision. This predictability is the currency of trust in international relations. It assures partners that the agreements signed today will be honored tomorrow, that alliances are built not on shifting sand, but on the foundation of principle and stable governance. Beyond the negotiating table, this integrity becomes the engine of soft power and public diplomacy. As Joseph Nye explained, true power in the 21st century is not merely about military might or economic strength, it is about the power to attract, to co opt, and to inspire. Nations with inclusive governance, vibrant civil societies, and a steadfast commitment to human dignity do not need to coerce, they attract. Their culture, their values, and their institutions become beacons of positive influence. They win the argument without raising their voice because the quality of their society speaks for itself. And ultimately, the connection between sound internal governance and adept diplomacy is our most potent tool for conflict prevention. Research shows that fragile governance is the most significant predictor of conflict. Therefore, diplomacy cannot simply be about managing crises, it must be about addressing their root causes. It must be informed by a deep understanding of governance, of how to build accountable institutions, foster social inclusion, and establish the rule of law. By strengthening governance, we do not just build stronger nations, we build more peaceful regions and a more secure world. We move from treating the symptoms of instability to curing the disease. In essence, governance is the soil from which effective diplomacy grows. You cannot have a foreign policy that is strong, credible, and influential if the domestic ground from which it springs is weak, corrupt, or fractured. The two are inextricably linked, one giving meaning, power, and purpose to the other. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on the theme of this conference, how do we harmonize governance with the demands of this new world? The social sciences provide our roadmap. First, we must integrate evidence-based policy. We must ground our decisions in sound methodologies, ethnographic studies, and historical analysis, moving beyond ideology to embrace facts. Second, we must foster participatory governance by applying insights from sociology and political science. We can design mechanisms for meaningful citizen engagement, tapping into the collective wisdom of our societies and enhancing legitimacy from the ground up. Third, we must build cross-disciplinary dialogue. The challenges we face are multidimensional. Economists, anthropologists, political scientists, and environmentalists must break down silos and work together to design policies that are holistic, not fragmented. Fourth, we must embed cultural sensitivity into the very heart of our diplomacy. Anthropology teaches us that culture shapes perception. Diplomacy that respects and understands cultural context is diplomacy that succeeds in building genuine long-term partnerships. And finally, we must strengthen our multilateral institutions. Theories of international relations emphasize that strong institutions foster cooperation. We must champion inclusive governance within these global bodies to effectively address our shared challenges from climate change to transnational crime. Ladies and gentlemen, the path to greater global influence to sustainable prosperity and to a stable and secure world order does not begin in a foreign ministry or at a trade negotiation. It begins at home. It begins with the unwavering daily pursuit of good governance, with transparency, with accountability, with an absolute commitment to the rule of law. This is how we build trust. This is how we build credibility. This is how we secure our borders and strengthen our hand in diplomacy. In the end, the most powerful foreign policy any nation can ever have, the strongest guarantor of its security, and the most compelling advocate for its territorial integrity is the solid integrity of its governance at home. As we live in a time of unprecedented challenges and opportunities, the convergence of governance and social sciences is not an abstract ideal, it is a practical necessity. Without it, governance risks becoming technocratic, detached from the realities of human life. With it, governance becomes transformative, capable of shaping societies that are just, resilient, and forward looking. As the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen reminds us, development has to be more concerned with enhancing the lives we lead and the freedoms we enjoy. This profound statement encapsulates the essence of harmonizing governance with social sciences. Governance must be human centered, rooted in freedom, dignity, and shared prosperity. In closing, let me once again commend the organizing committee for bringing us together under this timely theme. May our deliberations in this conference not only enrich our academic understanding but also inspire practical innovations that can shape policies, strengthen diplomacy, and foster a more harmonious global community. Let us leave this conference with a renewed commitment to harmonize governance with the insights of social sciences, for it is in this harmony that we shall find the keys to peace, prosperity, and progress for all humankind. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.